In a startling revelation that underscores the ongoing vulnerabilities in U.S. cybersecurity, a new book has reported that Chinese hackers infiltrated the GOP's email system last summer. This breach, which had been largely unreported until now, illustrates the pressing need for enhanced security measures within political organizations, especially as tensions escalate between the U.S. and China. The Wall Street Journal highlighted the incident, emphasizing its implications for national security and electoral integrity as the 2024 presidential election approaches. The infiltration of GOP communications not only raises questions about the effectiveness of current cybersecurity protocols but also points to a broader pattern of cyber espionage that has increasingly characterized U.S.-China relations. The hackers reportedly accessed sensitive information that could be leveraged in future political maneuvers, potentially compromising the GOP's ability to operate securely. Experts warn that such breaches could have far-reaching consequences, affecting public trust in the electoral process and foreign policy decisions. As the conflict in Ukraine continues to dominate headlines, the geopolitical landscape is further complicated by discussions surrounding a potential new order involving the US, Russia, and China. Recent commentary from international relations experts suggests that former President Donald Trump's approach may not be aimed at appeasing Vladimir Putin but rather envisioning a restructured world order where the US plays a more isolationist role. According to Professor Stephen Wolfe from the University of Birmingham, Trump's perspective aligns with a 19th-century view of geopolitics that prioritizes national interests over alliances, potentially sidelining Ukraine and Europe in the process. Wolfe draws parallels to the historical Munich Agreement, where major powers made critical decisions about smaller states, often without their involvement. He argues that, much like Czechoslovakia's predicament in 1938, Ukraine finds itself under immense pressure not only from Russia's military actions but also from U.S. diplomatic strategies that seem to favor concessions to Russia. Trump's administration has suggested that Ukraine might need to yield territorial claims to appease Moscow, which raises concerns about the future of Ukrainian sovereignty and the stability of Europe. Moreover, Trump's strategy appears to extend beyond Europe as he aims to realign U.S. foreign policy to counter China's growing influence. In interviews, Trump has expressed a desire to unite Russia and China, a tactic reminiscent of Richard Nixon's divide-and-conquer strategy during the Cold War. By seeking to weaken the partnership between these two nations, Trump hopes to reinforce U.S. dominance on the global stage. His Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed this sentiment, stating that the U.S. could benefit from a geopolitical partnership with Russia, highlighting the perceived threat posed by China's ascendance. This strategic pivot reflects a broader bipartisan consensus in Washington that views China as a paramount threat to U.S. interests. From intelligence assessments to public statements, officials across the political spectrum regard China's economic and military ambitions as a challenge to the established international order. The ongoing war in Ukraine serves not only as a humanitarian crisis but also as a distraction that, according to some U.S. policymakers, detracts from addressing the more significant challenge posed by China. As the landscape continues to evolve, the implications of these developments are profound. The U.S. appears torn between addressing immediate security threats posed by cyber intrusions and the long-term strategic challenge of a rising China, all while navigating complex relationships with Russia and Europe. The upcoming years will likely reveal how these dynamics will shape U.S. foreign policy and its role in the world. In conclusion, the infiltration of the GOP's email system by Chinese hackers serves as a stark reminder of vulnerabilities that must be addressed not just for political organizations but for national security as a whole. Meanwhile, Trump's foreign policy maneuvers suggest a shift towards an isolationist approach that could redefine the global order, with significant implications for Ukraine and the balance of power between major nations. As the geopolitical chess game unfolds, it will be crucial for all stakeholders to remain vigilant and adaptable to the changing landscape in the intricate web of international relations. Few dynamics are as compelling as the evolving ties between Latin America and China.
Recent developments suggest that these connections are not merely transactional but deeply rooted in the region's economic and geopolitical landscape.
As the U.S. seeks to reassert its influence, particularly under the Trump administration, it faces significant challenges in its attempts to diminish China's foothold in Latin America. The recent diplomatic maneuvering by Panama, which withdrew from China's Belt and Road Initiative following a visit from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, reflects a potential shift in the region's alignment.
President José Raúl Mulino's decision, although a significant step towards rekindling ties with Washington, does not signify an outright severance of Chinese influence. The complexities of Latin America's relationships with China vary widely, with countries navigating the U.S.-China rivalry according to their unique economic realities and strategic interests. Over the past 2 decades, while the U.S. was embroiled in conflicts in the Middle East, China methodically expanded its presence in Latin America. Data reveals that trade between China and the region skyrocketed from a mere $12 billion in 2000 to an astounding $315 billion by 2020, with projections indicating it could exceed $700 billion by 2035. China has become South America's largest trading partner, outpacing the U.S. significantly in key markets like Brazil, which now sees more than double the trade volume with China compared to its dealings with the U.S. China's strategy has been multifaceted, involving financial investments in infrastructure, natural resource extraction, and cultural diplomacy. For instance, it has established strategic partnerships with 10 of the 11 South American nations, underscoring its deep integration into the region's economies. When a Latin American head of state asked me for something, I lectured them. While I was preaching, the Chinese were building airports, noted former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, highlighting the stark contrast in approaches. The challenge for the Biden administration and now the Trump administration is how to shift this trajectory. Countries like Brazil and Mexico present significant hurdles as their ties with China have deepened, particularly in sectors critical to their economies. In Mexico, for instance, Chinese investments in the auto industry have surged, prompting concerns from Washington about the implications for the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement (USMCA). With Mexico emerging as China's second-largest auto market, the urgency for the U.S. to recalibrate its approach is palpable. In Argentina, the situation is equally complex. President Javier Milei aligned ideologically with Trump, must contend with the country's strong agricultural ties to China, which has become its largest buyer of agricultural products. This interdependence complicates the U.S.'s ability to exert influence, as it must balance its strategic objectives with the economic realities faced by its southern neighbors. Moreover, the ideological landscape in Latin America adds another layer of complexity. Many citizens express a growing disillusionment with democracy, with polls indicating that over half of the population would support an autocratic regime if it promised to address pressing economic issues. This sentiment plays into China's hands as it positions itself as a viable partner for development, often at the expense of U.S. interests. As the geopolitical chessboard shifts, the U.S. is also grappling with internal pressures to confront China more aggressively. Trump's recent America First investment policy aims to restrict Chinese investments in critical sectors, reflecting a broader strategy to curb Beijing's influence. However, this policy risks exacerbating tensions, as countries in Latin America might perceive it as a form of economic imperialism. The question remains, how far will the U.S. go to convince Latin American countries to pivot away from China? While Trump may be pushing for a de-risking strategy aiming to limit Chinese influence in areas perceived as security threats, many nations are likely to pursue a path that allows them to maintain beneficial ties with both superpowers. This reality suggests a potential for a new form of non-alignment reminiscent of Cold War dynamics, where nations seek to balance their relationships with both the U.S. and China. Looking ahead, the interplay between these global powers will shape the future of Latin America. The region finds itself at a crossroads, with its leaders needing to navigate a complex landscape of economic dependencies and geopolitical pressures.
The U.S. must recognize that its historical dominance is being challenged and that a nuanced approach, one that respects the agency of Latin American countries while addressing legitimate security concerns, will be crucial in redefining its role in a rapidly changing world. Tensions between the United States and China have reached new heights with the recent introduction of President Donald Trump's America First investment policy. Signed on February 24, 2025, this memorandum mandates a stringent approach to curbing Chinese-affiliated investments across critical sectors in the U.S., igniting concerns among Chinese investors and further straining the already fraught bilateral relationship. The policy outlines significant restrictions aimed at preventing Chinese investment in key areas such as technology, critical infrastructure, healthcare, agriculture, and energy. Furthermore, it seeks to deter American investments in China's military-industrial sector. As articulated in the memorandum, economic security is national security, underscoring the administration's belief that safeguarding U.S. interests is paramount in a landscape where China is often viewed as a strategic adversary. The memorandum also signals potential actions to suspend or terminate the long-standing 1984 tax treaty with China, which the administration claims has contributed to the deindustrialization of the U.S. and enhanced China's military modernization. This policy emerges against a backdrop of escalating concerns regarding Chinese activities in proximity to U.S. military installations. Reports have surfaced about a series of drone sightings near at least 17 military bases adjacent to Chinese-owned farmland across the country. The sightings have alarmed defense analysts, who fear that these unmanned aerial vehicles could be utilized for surveillance of military operations. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul expressed his suspicions, stating, "Based on my experience, those that are over our military sites are adversarial and most likely are coming from the People's Republic of China." The implications of these developments extend beyond immediate security concerns. The Trump administration's stance could potentially lead to increased economic decoupling between the two nations. The memorandum indicates a willingness to impose even stricter controls on outbound U.S. investments in areas deemed critical to national security, including semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology. Such measures could deter innovation and collaboration in sectors that thrive on global partnerships and shared expertise. As the U.S. moves forward with its America First investment policy, analysts are closely watching its ramifications on global markets and international relations. The heightened scrutiny on Chinese investments may push Beijing to retaliate, thereby exacerbating trade tensions that have persisted for years. Moreover, the potential suspension of the 1984 tax treaty may create additional barriers for businesses operating across borders, further complicating the economic landscape. In the broader context, these events coincide with growing military cooperation between the U.S. and its allies in the region. Notably, a U.S. Marine Corps Major General recently participated in Taiwan's largest military exercise to date, highlighting the strategic importance of Taiwan amidst rising tensions with China. This military collaboration reflects a concerted effort to bolster regional security and counter China's assertive posture in the Indo-Pacific. As these geopolitical dynamics unfold, the impacts of the America First investment policy will likely reverberate through both nations' economies and their standing on the global stage. Observers are keenly aware that the coming months will reveal whether this policy will usher in a new era of U.S.-China relations marked by increased isolationism and competition, or if it will lead to a recalibration of engagement strategies that prioritize dialogue and mutual benefit. The world watches as the U.S. navigates this complex landscape, aware that its decisions will shape the future of international relations for years to come.